When we chat in the comments about why you won't leave your toxic job and how hard it is to find a job when you have a job, I know the challenges firsthand. So with that, let's get into the excuses that are stopping you from quitting your job. The first one is really big, and this is by far the most common based on a poll that I recently did on LinkedIn. I can't afford it. Now, the largest group that responded to the survey was staying at their job for the paycheck. That's the only reason why they were not walking away. And quite honestly, this totally makes sense. Approximately 1 in 5 Americans depend on their next paycheck in order to pay their bills. That is serious, and anyone who tries to undermine that or say it's a money mindset issue, they deserve to be slapped with a fish. I would love to tell you that you should just walk away from your toxic job immediately without question and without any other practical consideration like paying your bills. That is not the reality for most people. And on average, I think the statistic was that most people could go about 10 weeks, which given the current economy might not be sufficient for everyone in their job search. So if the excuse that you have for not quitting your toxic job is that you don't have the financial resources, that is valid. But that doesn't mean that you can't do anything about it. There is no time like the present to start squirreling away cash for a rainy day. In my opinion, everyone needs what I call an oh fund. Thanks to my financial planner mom, I always had an oh fund. And my oh fund was exactly the reason why I was able to walk into a job that I hated and quit with no job and no plan, how I was able to immigrate with a forced employment gap to a new country and still land my dream job, and even turn down a terrible offer from what wouldn't have been a great company in the process, and why when I eventually got fired from my toxic company, I did not care. In fact, I was relieved. Most financial experts, which I'm not, suggest having a 3-month cash reserve just in case something happens. However, when you run the math on your living expenses, your rent, your food, your entertainment, all of that stuff for 3 months, and let's face it, if you're more senior in your career, you need longer. If you have $0 in savings, that sounds like a lot of money. In my experience, getting that ball rolling is the absolute hardest. It gets easier once you actually have a little bit of savings to make that savings and your oh fund grow. On the other side of this coin though, you'll find the golden handcuffs, and I've been fortunate enough to be on this side of the issue as well. Sometimes your job pays so well that you perceive a challenge finding an opportunity that is going to compensate you so healthily anywhere else. For example, this is something that comes up with a lot of people that I work with that are at big tech companies, and I was at a big tech company once, so I totally relate to this. These companies intentionally pay above market salaries because it makes it harder for you to leave. And if you want to go to a scrappy startup, they probably can't match the 80th percentile of market. And for those of you who are in tech or have equity in your company, that can also become a substantial component of your compensation. And when you leave, that all disappears. If you are feeling the weight of the golden handcuffs, there are 2 things that I would like for you to consider. First, maybe you're wrong. Maybe that scrappy startup is willing to match your compensation, and you're in a financial position where they're offering you a hefty equity package that has the potential to pay off in the long run. I have a whole video on that one. You'll also see other common practices that can help to compensate for this, such as signing bonuses and additional equity grants. So while you think you might not be able to command the same income if you leave your current company, that just might not be true. And you never know until you negotiate. But even more important, if you are miserable at your job, if you hate your job and you want to quit, but you're only staying for the money, I have to ask you a really serious question. What's more important? Will having lower compensation matter as much as being miserable at work almost every day? Now again, I'm not going to write off any financial responsibilities that we have. Sometimes those golden handcuffs you can't leave because that's now your standard of living and you can't go back down here. But when it's financially feasible, this is a valid question, and ultimately you have to ask yourself, what's more important to you? Your job satisfaction or your monetary success? There's no right or wrong answer, and I say this completely without judgment. This is something that you need to decide on your own, but it is a question that you need to answer. And remember, when you decide that the money is what matters, it's no longer an excuse It's a decision. Now, I'm really curious for those of you watching if either of these financial considerations is the reason why you're staying in a job that you hate. If it is, just drop a money bag emoji into the comments down below. And while money plays a really big role, there's so many other excuses that we use to keep ourselves in a job that is making us miserable or in a toxic work environment. And this next one is a pretty big one. And I know it hit a few chords when I posted about it on LinkedIn the other day. And that is the I am not a quitter story. This is one that I told myself personally. Think about it. Throughout your childhood and even your adulthood, how many times have you been told not to quit by your parents, by your teachers, by coworkers, by friends, by coaches? The answer isn't supposed to be in quitting, right? Well, now that story is playing over a work environment that is not healthy for you or one in which you've outgrown and is making you miserable. And that story is strong. One thing that always, quite honestly, gives me a little bit of a laugh is that most people that I talk to that are in a job where they're really miserable, there's like these big dramatic dreams about quitting. Even if they have no intentions, it's like the daydream about quitting, right? But the reality of quitting, even when you have had that kind of quitting your job fantasy, is that the actual act of quitting your job brings up a lot of stuff. And most people hate doing it because the messaging that we've received about quitting is that if we quit, we're admitting defeat. But when it comes to our careers, this is absolutely not the case. Quitting your job simply means that the path that you've walked on has brought you to another path in the journey. And that path is going to bring you where you really want to go. And hopefully, it's going to be a path that you really enjoy. Quitting your job is not personal. Just like how we talked about, it simply means that you are following the career journey that you are meant to have. The next excuse that we tell ourselves when we're miserable or stuck in a job is that it's not that bad. We rationalize the bad behavior and we essentially gaslight ourselves. Here's an example from my toxic workplace experience. My boss would DM me around the clock. And if I did not immediately respond and take action, they would throw a fit. And I totally brushed this off as being something that was typical in the role that this person had. It was a personality trait, something that you would expect. So we excuse the bad behavior as just being a little bit of a quirk. Or we think we can change the behavior. And I cannot tell you how many times I have had conversations with people about the fact that they stayed in a toxic workplace or in a bad work situation or a job where they were stuck because they thought it would change. Or we're trying to shield people that we work with, or this is especially true if you're a manager or a leader in your organization. Or maybe you think that the situation is going to change, or the leaders that are involved and the opportunities are going to change. And really, these are all excuses that are keeping us stuck. Because I know this is going to sound really cynical, but do tigers change their stripes? While I absolutely think that companies and leaders can absolutely evolve, this takes work. And depending on the issue, it might not be one that they even want to fix. Perhaps the issue that you are having is a feature and not a bug. And sometimes there's just common workplace issues that are happening, such as favoritism. Now, if people are getting promotions as a result of favoritism, so leaders are promoting their favorites, guess what's going to happen? The favorite promotes their favorite, and that cycle continues. In order for it to be broken, there kind of needs to be a unanimous decision in order to promote on more fair grounds. And I'm not going to say that these workplace issues are never going to be resolved. If anyone believes in the ability of a company and people to evolve, it is absolutely me. It's why I do what I do for a living. However, you leaning back, making excuses, and waiting your turn is not serving you in your career. And that brings me directly into the next excuse that we use, even though it might not be totally conscious, and that, my friend, is self-doubt. Quitting a job takes confidence. Often it involves going and finding another job, which requires confidence. Or if you're quitting your job without another job, well, that's a bold move. The thing is when we're not in a work situation that is supporting us, whether it's a toxic work environment, we're being passed over for promotions, we're not being acknowledged for how awesome we are, this can actually start to chip away at our self-confidence. And those chips actually have a compounding effect, because the less confident you are, the more likely you are going to be passed over for the next promotion as well, or to suffer the brunt of the next slight from a toxic boss. And I'm not saying that this is just going to make you, completely devoid of self-worth and self-confidence. I mean, for me, it didn't, but it made some very precise hits. Now, I consider myself a very confident person across the board. My default setting is that my confidence derives internally, so I'm not really shaken about what things people say or what people think about me. However, when I was in a toxic work environment, my boss would gaslight me. He would completely overflex his connections, and while he never said, "You'll never work in this town again," it was kinda implied. And even though I actually had a steady stream of job offers and recruiters hitting my inbox, it still psyched me out. I take my professional reputation and my personal brand very seriously, and any risk to that scared me. And honestly, by comparison, I was unscathed. So many people that I have worked with that have been in a toxic work environment or an unhealthy work environment have lost sight of how awesome they are. And if this kind of sounds familiar, if you feel like this might be something that you are struggling with on some level or in some way, you need to prioritize building your confidence. Like right now. A great way to get started is by downloading my free UAQ starter kit. Knowing your unique awesomeness quotient is going to help you be aware of all of your awesomeness, and this is going to become the foundation for you to skyrocket your confidence and your success at work. You can get it using the link down below. And this actually brings me to another excuse that we tell ourselves that keeps us stuck in a job that is making us miserable. And this one is actually kind of specific for people that are in customer service roles or roles where being liked is a necessity and part of your performance appraisal. And that is, I can work with anyone. If you work in sales, customer service, client success, professional services, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. Because you are measured based on how well you work with other people and the relationships that you build. To be frank, a lot of my career success was built directly on the fact that I can work with the biggest asshole and still turn over phenomenal PSAT scores. That's project satisfaction for any of you that don't work in professional services. So when me and my boss didn't get along, my heels automatically dug in because this was my identity at work. I can work with anyone. But the thing is, that story and that identity was so ingrained that I never stopped to ask myself the much more important situation in my miserable job. Should I work with anyone? And also because it was pretty clear that that boss could not work with me. And while it's easy for me to sit here and call them a toxic boss, let's just be honest. They have a perspective of their own. And just like not how everyone is going to like you, not everyone is going to be able to work with you. And sometimes that's a them issue, and sometimes there is elements about you that make that a fact. I won't psychoanalyze the situation that I have because it would be completely biased to my own perspective. And I'm sure that this person sings a very different tune about me. At the end of the day, there's only so much BS that you really should have to deal with at work. And while I know that there are practical considerations, such as money that we talked about, you do not deserve to be miserable at work. In fact, I would venture to say that you deserve to have a job that you like, at least most of the time. One where you are recognized for being the awesome individual that you are, given the opportunities that you deserve, and doesn't give you the Sunday scaries 7 days a week. Now, if you're still not sure if you should quit your job, I want you to go and check out this video right here, where I break down the top signs that you should quit your job immediately. But before you go, if this video helped you figure out the excuses that were really holding you to a miserable job that you are ready to move on from, give this video a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and as always, thank you so much for watching, my friend. I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.